Heavenly Father, today we put on the full armor to protect us against attack. We put on the belt of truth to protect against lies and deception. We put on the breastplate of righteousness to protect our hearts from the temptations. We put the gospel of peace on our feet to walk in your light, peace, and freedom with the Holy Spirit. We rebuke anxious thoughts. We take up your shield of faith for protection to block and destroy all the darts and threats thrown at us by the enemy. We put on the helmet of salvation to cover our minds and thoughts, reminding us that we are children of a mighty King. We are forgiven, set free, saved by the blood of Jesus. We take up the sword of the Spirit, your living word, that has the power to demolish strongholds and is sharper than any double-edged sword. We come to you, Lord, in prayer daily. In Jesus' mighty name we pray. Amen.
Amen. That was beautiful. I love
Oh,
that
thank
prayer.
you.
Beautiful. Wow. What a
What's up, you
blessing.
guys? Welcome to The Imagination. I'm your host, Emma, and today I'm absolutely honored to introduce you all to satanic ritual abuse, mind control, and organized abuse survivor, whistleblower, and overcomer, public speaker, podcaster, and podcast host, entrepreneur, business owner, and visionary, award-winning international human resource consultant and career coach, independent LifeWave distributor, marathoner, weightlifter, child of God, and all around badass and inspiration, Lynne Scott Haggerman. Lynn's life is a testament to the unyielding strength of the human spirit. As a survivor of profound trauma, she has transformed unimaginable hardship into a powerful mission to uplift others, advocate for justice, and shine a light on the darkest corners of the human experience. Her journey from surviving childhood abuse to becoming a voice for healing and empowerment is both heart-rending and inspiring, offering hope to countless others who seek to reclaim their lives. Born into a world that would test her resilience from an early age, Lynn endured harrowing experiences of trafficking and ritual abuse as a child. These traumatic events, which she has bravely shared through platforms like podcasts and interviews, occurred in environments that should have been safe, including underground settings tied to institutions of power. Yet, even in the face of such darkness, Lynn's spirit refused to be broken. Her survival is a powerful reminder that courage can emerge from the deepest pain, and her story is one of triumph over adversity. Lynn's path to healing was neither linear nor easy. Confronting fragmented memories of her early years required immense bravery and spiritual fortitude. She drew strength from deep well of resilience, piecing together her past to reclaim her narrative. This process of self-discovery transformed her pain into purpose as she emerged not only as a survivor, but as a thriver, a woman determined to help others navigate their own journeys of recovery. Her candid discussions about her experiences, shared through platforms like the Lynne Scott Haggerman Show on Rumble, reveal a woman who refuses to be silenced, using her voice to expose systemic abuses and advocate for the vulnerable. Beyond her advocacy, Lynn is a multifaceted individual whose life reflects a commitment to service and creativity. A serial entrepreneur, artist, and visionary, she has channeled her energy into diverse endeavors, from content creation to sound healing. Her work as a podcaster and educator reflects her passion for learning and uplifting others, offering tools for healing and empowerment. Lynn's ability to transform her trauma into a source of inspiration is evident in her advocacy, where she provides a platform for other survivors and whistleblowers to share their stories and find solidarity. Lynn's mission extends beyond personal healing to a broader call for justice and systemic change. Her willingness to speak truth to power, even at great personal risk, echoes the courage of those who challenge oppression in all its forms. Through her interviews and public appearances, Lynn has sparked critical conversations about the realities of trafficking and abuse, urging society to confront uncomfortable truths. Her work resonates with those who have been silenced, offering hope and a vision for a world free of exploitation. Today, Lynn stands as a beacon of hope and resilience. Her journey from surviving unimaginable trauma to becoming a warrior for truth and healing is a powerful reminder that light can emerge from even the darkest places. Through her advocacy, creativity, and unwavering commitment to others, Lynn inspires countless others to reclaim their agency and find strength in their own stories. Her legacy is one of courage, compassion, and an unrelenting belief in the power of healing. a legacy that continues to transform lives and challenge the world to do better. Before I finish introducing today's guest, I have just a couple quick reminders and updates. If you'd like to be on the show, if you'd like to share any information privately with me, or if you'd like to submit a written testimony to be published on my Substack or my upcoming book series, you can email me at imagineabetterworld2020@gmail.com or standbysurvivors@protonmail.com, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. After a termination last year, my new YouTube channel is finally up to date, meaning you can now watch weekly podcast premieres on there as well as Rumble and X. Come hang in the chat with our amazing community and moderators every Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday at 6 p.m. Central Time. And lastly, all my links to keep in touch are in the show notes. Please connect with me across any and all platforms you're able to, and all links to connect with today's guests and to watch their previous episodes on the show if they were on, or any of their own shows and links will be below as well. Thank you all on the other side of the screen for helping to make the imagination the safest space on the internet for survivor, advocate, educator, and whistleblower disclosures. Your support means the absolute world to me and to every other guest on the show. So you guys, without further ado, please help me in welcoming today's guest of honor, voice for the voiceless, walking miracle, survivor and anti-child abuse advocate, powerhouse warrioress, friend of the Holy Spirit, and a hero who speaks to honor the many children who did not survive and to be their voice. The one, the only, Lynne Scott Haggerman. Lynn, thank you so much for being here with us today. It's such an honor to finally have you on.
You're amazing. So, Emma, I think that was the best introduction I've ever had in my time of podcasting. You are so gracious and such a beautiful soul. Thank you so much for having me. It is my honor and my pleasure and my joy to be on your show today. I have followed you from before I was able to speak. And now look at me, I'm speaking. So God bless you for having me on your show. But that was a beautiful introduction.
And you're worth every word. I hope that there's more introductions like that, the more and more people have you on their shows and recognize the incredible miracle that you are. We're so lucky that you're here today and that we get to learn from you. And so with that being said, I am just so impressed with everything that you've done in such a short amount of time and the amount of podcasts that you've gone on and done yourself and all the public speaking that you've done and advocacy. And I'm really excited to talk about that today. And nobody would ever guess that behind this woman that we see right now, that smile, this beautiful face, your outfit, and your energy, that such a harrowing story is behind all of that that you overcame. So I thought we'd start by sharing a little bit about your background and story, and wanted to first ask how this sort of got passed down to you. Do you know how far back in your own lineage this went and how this ended up being perpetuated generationally in your family?
Yeah, so that's a great question to start with. There was generational pedophilia on my mother's side of the family. And as far as I know, it goes back eons because no one wakes up one day and they're a pedophile. No, I mean, it's comes from what was done to them as being harmed as a child. And so my mother was the one who sent me to the child trafficking ring that was at a neighbor's house. And she was the one that sent me to the university medical center where they experimented on the children. She hated me from the day I was born. She hated me in the womb. She hated me till the day she died a couple years ago. I'll never know why, but I do know that she had to be badly damaged as a little girl herself. And why some people come out of this harming others and why others come out not, I'll never know. But it definitely comes from that line. And what's interesting is when I was growing up, around the family dinner table, and we were, I would call us lower middle class socioeconomically, and they would fondly tell stories about grandma, about how she was married at 13. And they were told so fondly, I never stopped to think, 13, 13. I mean, what? You know, and so her story was my grandfather took her behind a barn and she got pregnant. So that makes him a pedophile. And no one, it just, the denial, and I understand it because I was in denial for years too. It's a survival technique, but denial is so heavily in generational pedophilia. And so, did my grandfather wake up one day as a pedophile? No. So it goes back way far in that family line to create my mother. Now, praise God, it stopped with me.
That is a really great point that you bring up. I see how ill trauma-informed society is, all the way from the medical field to the base of society. And there's so many different misconceptions about abuse and about trauma and about really what creates somebody who does bad things. I think society does have that vantage point that, oh yeah, that person chose to do that. And at some point they do. You can change and not hurt people at some point. We do become conscious enough at some point. Even
That's
mind
right.
control survivors, their programming starts to break at some point and they can choose. And some people don't. So of course there's choice involved. But it's like you said, a child can't consent. So if a child is badly battered and beaten and abused and goes through something like what you did, there's very little chance for them to not have to do and perpetuate those types of abuses themselves and to not be manipulated to the point where they accept that as who they are and what they're meant to do to the next generation through the family and through grooming. It's hard enough sometimes, and I think people forget. You look at even dietary preferences in families and weight and different bad habits that can be passed down generationally. If parents eat really poorly and don't work out, a lot of times their kids don't, and it just becomes this cycle. And all of a sudden, it's genetics that cause this. When it's like, no, you can change. You can be the one to say, no, I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to not eat all this crap food that my parents fed me, and I'm not going to feed it to my kids. And so you can break cycles. But when you look at a lot of times, even something as simple as dietary preferences and habits that are in intergenerational and families, and how hard that is to break and how far back that goes, and then you compare that to something like abuse, manipulation, and grooming from a child, and you see that a lot of these children just they don't stand a chance against it. And I often wonder that too. What separates the people, the majority of the people who stay in these systems and continue these cycles from the Lynne Haggermans and the Juliets and the Kathy O'Briens, that for some reason you guys are the ones that no matter how many generations it went back, it doesn't fly with you, and you can always just resist it. And your spirits are so unbreakable in that way. But really, it's hard to see. It's once you see all the strongholds that are put on somebody that goes through this type of grooming and abuse, I mean, it's an absolute miracle to me that anybody gets out of it when you see how much goes into keeping you in those generational cycles. And so it really is. It's an absolute miracle that you're on this side now and you're able to share about it, and educate us on sort of what creates this, instead of it being what people think is kind of a random act of violence, that somebody's just crazy and likes children or likes to abuse, and they have no idea or can't conceptualize the amount of training, conditioning, grooming, and normalization of these horrific things on a little child, and how that can eventually result in a monster whenever they grow up.
I mean, you're absolutely right. Absolutely right. And Kathy O'Brien will talk about the how through the Hitler Heimler research during Nazi Germany, the MK Ultra mind control, and MK is a German word, mind control, how they learned that by the time you have pedophilia in 3 generations, it is in the DNA. Just to your point, it's like being overweight, not exercising. At some point, it gets in the DNA. So they discovered that, and then they infiltrated our society too. I mean, this problem has been around since time began, but they have made it so much more horrific than before. So there was definitely long-term generational pedophilia that harmed my mother. And, I believe the MK Ultra, to your point, the training is so intense and severe that what I find is people who listen, and God bless your audience for listening to the stories, they, if you can imagine try to imagine these things happening to you, and what would you be like? And then people start getting an inkling of, and it's not to justify any behaviors, because as you said, what I discovered was, normally by the time somebody was 9, 10 years old, they'd made their choices. So by that age, in Christian terminology, we call it the age of accountability. There's an age where people definitely know right from wrong, and that's when they choose, and they've set their path.
I think that that's a really shocking statistic too to talk about. You think about, a kid that's 9 years old that didn't grow up in this environment and their only concern for the world is trying to play or going to school and hanging out with their friends and doing homework. And you think about the types of adult situations that these very young kids have to contend with and face every single day, these very mature things that no adult I even know would be okay having done to them, or having to decide, these impossible choices, these horrific scenarios that they're forced into, and these just absolutely heinous abuses that they're subjected to. But you're right. If any normal person that wasn't, that had a normal upbringing, I should say, um, were to be put in these situations, how would they be if they were electrocuted, if they were tortured, forced to do things and harm other people and watch people be harmed in front of them? And it's just amazing to me that on the other side of this, so many of you come out of this with so much love and empathy and compassion in your hearts, because nobody could blame you if you would be just hateful and spiteful and angry. And man, we really have a lot to learn from you guys. There's people that haven't gone through anything close to what you have, and they're just full of malice and hatred and so toxic for our society. And it really seeps so deep in there, where if we were to just understand trauma and how to undo it in ourselves, we could all have this really high frequency space that we all live in, and providing that for each other.
Well, and I often wonder, the people with all of the anger now. So we know that, I call it a God-given gift, wiping out our memories so we can quasi-function in society. And by doing that, you don't remember a lot of what happened. And I believe that until the repressed memories come, which can start beginning in the 30s and beyond. Statistically, years ago, there was a police data was researched, and they found that reported crimes against the children at that time, it was 25% of little girls and 10% of little boys had been harmed. This was many years ago, police reports. Now, Emma, most of this isn't reported. And so um, myself, my trauma therapist, the work I do, I would, and my trauma therapist agrees, at least 50% of little girls are being harmed or have been, and 25% of little boys. Now, I was recently on a podcast of a ministry group that helps veterans with PTSD and anxiety from combat. He said 80% of the people who enter the military have been harmed as children. 80%.
Whoa.
80%. And so when you stop and think about these numbers, I I'll tell people, when you're at church, when you're at Walmart, when you're wherever you go, at a minimum, every little girl you look at, I want you to know she's being harmed as you're walking through shopping or worshiping, right there, church or not, it doesn't matter. And at a minimum, um, I would have educated guess 30% along of little boys. However, after hearing the military folks talk about that, I'm I'm getting hard pressed to not think the numbers are even higher. So, I look at today. Why are there so many alcoholics, drug addicts, suicides, all these people with anger issues? Well, either they have remembered and they don't know what to do about it, and they just are furious, or they have a piece of their memory. I always knew something was horrifically wrong with me my whole life. I didn't know what it was. I had 5% of my memory. God wiped out 95% when I was 5 years old and the trauma stopped. And so I knew something was really, really wrong. And it caused me to behave in dysfunctional manners. And I never knew why, because I couldn't remember what happened to me. But I knew that, I had a terrible time with relationships and connecting with people, and I never felt I belonged, and all these things that no one else seemed to understand, but I did. So I wonder how much of what we're looking at are trauma victims and that need our support and encouragement and reaching out to them with the tools that we have, when they're ready. Sometimes people just aren't ready yet, but I'm just starting to look around and wonder and question at everything I'm seeing. And I know quite a bit of it too is MK Ultra. The government has done an excellent job with this, and so many people are under MK Ultra mind control, which causes triggers. I believe, for example, the word Trump has been used as a trigger word for people during their programming because it's ridiculous what we see. I mean, it's just beyond the pale, makes absolutely no sense, which is MK Ultra too.
Yes, absolutely. And that's a really good analogy to ask of people to look at their surroundings and to sort of hold that space briefly for a moment instead of just doing what you're doing. Look around you and realize how many people statistically, even if it was on that low end, I think even 10% of the people that we walk by or 5% could be going through horrific abuse. I mean, we should all be up in arms, but to look
Right.
at 20, 30, 40, 80% of our military getting
Yes.
abused, and that we're all just kind of, having these very surface level conversations and not holding that compassion for each other. And, we have so many missed opportunities of sort of reflecting and seeing what our world is, and being able to be helpful and instrumental in bringing awareness to that.
Yes, absolutely. So that's part of my hope is that helping people to, it's part of my mission to understand this is real and it's happening and the scope and the breadth and what everyone can do to help humanity because we have entered the golden age. We are in the age of the Great Awakening. Different faiths will call it different things, but we're here. And it's time for we, the people, to take action to help with this, which, God bless you for what all you do, Emma, because you have been interviewing survivors for so long and getting the truth out in the light, because that's how we break this is by shining a light on the cockroaches in the darkness, because they've been in the darkness enjoying themselves for a long time and no more. We're shining a light, and they can't do anymore with, which is why there's so much exposure happening because they're having to come out and show their face. And what we're seeing is just uglier and uglier and uglier. For example, you take the last Olympics and the pedophile show. So they're having to come and show their face, and they're not welcome. This is not welcome.
Right. And people like you are coming on board and, whether it's right now or years ago, sharing your stories and being a voice for people. And it gives people courage to know that they're not alone and to see what's on the other side of that. And that, yes, it's scary to speak out. Yes, it's scary in a lot of ways to talk about the hard things in our life. But our worst fears rarely happen, and that there's a lot of beauty and healing that can come from speaking out, and that you can do it in a way too that benefits other people. I know you're not speaking out just because of you, you're doing it because other people are going through this and that they don't have the opportunity that you do to speak about it. So I think too, commending you and others for coming forward. That's helping with the disclosure. It's giving people courage who otherwise would have just been at home harboring their trauma for the rest of their life and never sharing about it.
Absolutely. And from my background and my perspective, I have been in very deep healing since 2011 when the first repressed memory came. And one tool, if I can call it that, for my deep healing is God the Father and the Lord Jesus Christ and Holy Spirit. And I always knew that one day I would be giving my testimony. And I could not in a million years, when I was in healing, have imagined it. And as a matter of fact, I would never have spoken myself until God said it's time, because then I knew I was healed enough. Because if I would have tried to have spoken before it was time, you and I couldn't talk. I'd be in a heap, crying, melt, mess. could not have done this, could not have remotely been able to do this. And so I kept working hard, and I still do. I work very, very hard on my healing and my trauma recovery, very hard. And I'm sure I will for the rest of my life because what happened to me was so heinous and happened for so long. But when so before I started speaking, I uh, I had a vision of how I would give my testimony, Emma, and it went like this. I thought, okay, I'm going to hide speak, and I'm going to do that by going in churches with 10 members, and I'm going to speak, and then I'm going to run and leave. So that was my vision before I started before I started speaking, and then in so I'm going along in healing, and I've had a marvelous, God-filled Christian therapist who's a national trauma therapist helping me. I've seen her a minimum of once a week since before 2011. But so I get healing and healing and healing. And one day in January of last year, God says, it's time. And I'm like, time? Time to start giving your testimony. I'm like, oh, really? You think I'm ready? And he goes, yes, you're ready. And so I was seeing my therapist that day, and I asked her, I said, I mean, not that I wouldn't, I do, I love the Lord. I try to do everything he asked me to do because it's always marvelous. And but I asked my therapist, I said, what do you think? And she goes, yeah, it's time. Well, she knows me possibly better than I know myself. So I thought, okay, so, in my mind came the church members with 10 members, high give my testimony concept. And so I kept praying about it. And in January of last year, God had me start on the LifeWave patches. And when I started those, it decreased my anxiety and PTSD by 70%, which was astounding. And at that time, I had so I sell them myself now because the Lord asked me to help other people, and which it does. But at that time, Michael Jaco is a podcaster. He's a former CIA and Navy SEAL, and he has this show where you can tell about miracles that happen from using LifeWave technology. And so they're on Monday nights. And one Monday, this was on March, I was still waiting for the Lord to show me the little 10-member churches to speak to. And on March 4th of last year, that morning, God said, I want you to speak on Michael Jaco's show tonight. And I'm like, God, no, no, that can't be the plan. He's got like 120,000 people. You can't. I'm supposed to hide, give my testimony. And God's like, no, this is where I want you to speak for the first time in my life. I mean, I never told anybody, and so, but I love the Lord because he helped me survive. And so I'm like, okay, Lord. And I was so scared. And I wasn't scared to speak my testimony. I was scared that I wouldn't honor the Lord the way I wanted to.
Mhm.
And so, like an hour before or 30 minutes before the show, or 5 minutes before the show, anyway, I was with my therapist and I told her what God said. And she goes, do it. And I'm like, oh, you think I'm ready? She's like, do it. God said to do it, do it.
Oh, that's
So,
wonderful.
so I went on the show and shaking. 5 minutes, I gave my testimony, and you could have heard a pin drop because not many people say what I say. And so Michael Jaco looked at me. He goes, "I want you on my show," just like that. And I'm like, "Wow." And so the next thing I knew, on 4/24/24, which the same numbers forward and backward, the great reversal, what was will never be again. I spoke on his show and gave an hour testimony. It was the first time I given, a full testimony. And then, bam, I'm off and running. Like you said, I've been on several shows, several podcasts, started my own. But this is the God I serve. So when you were talking about people speaking from, I can tell my story. I mean, people need to pray and do however they're led or whoever they listen to get their information, loved ones, friends. But for me, when I'm glad I didn't speak before the Lord told me to speak because I wouldn't have been able to. And since then, Kathy O'Brien's become a good friend, and she'll say the same thing that if people come out too soon and speak, they'll get triggered and go back to hide. And so, I haven't been, I mean, I still get triggers, yes, but when you were talking about people sharing, that's how it all started. And every time I speak, I do. I heal a little bit more and I heal a little bit more. And every time I speak, normally somebody will email and, ask for this is happening to me and how can, how help me? What can I do? Or I want to help you, Lynn. How can I help you? And each time I hear from someone that I can help or that wants to support me, I heal a bit more because when I was little, I helped other children survive, and that made me feel really good. And so now I'm doing the same thing. I'm no longer, I call it social isolation. I always had my businesses, so I was always like, wasn't like I was sitting here alone in the house, but socially I stayed isolated. And now I'm back to helping people survive and helping people to live and not give up. And I love that. And for the first time, I'm getting supported by other people because, I never had that when I was little. I could have cried and I tried a couple of times, but I was punished so severely I quit. But by the time I was 6 months old, I stopped crying. I would never have asked for help because it never received. So I learned to be independent and not trust anyone and not ask for help. So now, I have people reaching out asking me, how can I help you? I mean, it's just so beautiful once you're ready to start sharing the doors that are opened and the beautiful experiences in your life, people will treasure. So I want to encourage everyone, when you know you're ready, um, speak.
Amen to that. And little Lynn would be so proud of the woman that you are and that you're the leader and the parent and sort of the protector that she never had. You turned into that. And that's a really beautiful gift to give yourself, in this journey, in addition to everything that you're giving to everybody else. What a beautiful way to honor the child that you were by becoming the person that you didn't have growing up. And that
Oh,
is just, I mean, for people listening, I know jaws are going to be on the floor thinking about at 6 months, you had to make the decision not to cry when most people, for one, don't even remember being 6 months old, but for two, that's all you do when you're 6 months old as a baby is you cry. And so, going back to one of the things that I said, these impossible choices that these very adult and mature and just, horrific choices that you have to deal with while being in these types of families and environments. And so your abuse really started right after you were born, right?
yes. So whenever I was born, my mom sent me to the child trafficking house that was at a neighbor's house. And these child trafficking houses are all over the United States, in every town, I guarantee you, and in every town worldwide. So this was in it was I'll call it a regional trafficking house, and people would come. I remember people in religious garb, politicians, law enforcement. These were the customers, law enforcement, doctors, businessmen, women, all walks of life would come to the trafficking house. And whenever I was a baby, the torturing began. And it's for people, and I know your audience is pretty well educated, but they they find if you can imagine a child being in the hands of a monster with no conscience, many of them I don't believe had souls. I believe they'd already given them to Satan, but and then they get a child, anything their evil, horrific minds can dream up to do, they can do because there's no one to stop them. Now, I had a home to go back to, so they couldn't kill me, and there was only so far I could be physically and mentally tortured. But I saw so many children come through the house that, I don't know where they came from. I'm sure they were kidnapped. I'm sure they were maybe sold by their family. We know that there are uh, women who are kidnapped who are used as breeders to create the children for the trafficking. And so whenever I was little, as a baby, I would go over there and be physically and mentally tortured. And by physically, I was rarely given food, or anything to drink for my whole first 5 years of my life, which makes it challenging as an adult with food. But so yeah, so by the time I was 6 years old, I would babies cry, so of course I would cry. That's what they do. But those of you with little ones, I am a voice for the voiceless. I'm here to speak for the little ones because they don't have a voice. They can't talk like me. And try to imagine those of you with your own children or grandchildren, nieces, nephews, a 6 month old that no longer cries. And it's unfathomable to people, but that's what it's like in a trafficking house. So I stopped crying, and effects of that, I remember when I was 18 months old, I was at the top of the stairs with a bunch of kids, and someone pushed me down the whole flight of stairs. And whenever I landed at the bottom, I broke my shoulder, and I never cried, never cried. Now, picture. Um, so I'm trying to, again, I'm a voice for the little ones. I want people to understand what it's like from a little one standpoint. So picture an 18-month-old that falling down a flight of stairs, and they hit the bottom and they don't cry. Picture them being taken. I still remember the car ride, and I remember my mom fascinated by the fact that I didn't cry. She kind of enjoyed it because she was just fascinated at the amount of torture I'd been through that would create the ability in me to not cry. And she would tell the story kind of fondly. It was one of those fond memories at the kitchen table during dinner time. Remember the time, Lynn, you broke your shoulder, and I was so amazed you never cried. So as an adult now, I'm like, but anyway, so I didn't. And she will fondly talk about how I sniffled once, maybe twice, and that was all she ever heard of me. So people don't cry, or I didn't cry. The ones who cried didn't make it. I'll put it to you that way. I remember when I was 2 years old. So my mom hated me deeply, and whenever I was 2 years old, she, for the most part, she did not do much of the physical torture, but the mental and emotional torture. And I know that that's part of because it takes conditioning and programming to make children be able to be tortured like they do with us. So they taught my mom what to say and what to do to make sure that I was fully conditioned. And she was glad to do it.
Oh my gosh. And so these adults that were sort of running this operation at this house, you said there's tons of other adults flowing through. There's other children there. Where did these adults, were they part of MK Ultra, or how did they learn these techniques, and how many other children were they doing this to?
So droves, unimaginable. I was there for 5 years, unimaginable amount of children. The um, the people who lived in the house, there were grandparents and a couple, and then the couple had many children. That's who lived in the house. From my memories, I'm very confident that the grandfather that was in charge was ex-military or current military, and because of the torture techniques that he would use, were uh, a lot were very military oriented, but they ran the house. And then it was a regional hub for people to come. So there were adults coming through all the time and children coming through all the time. And the children, other than myself, there were no regulars except the children of the parents who lived in the house. Other than that, there was a constant flow of children, and tons and tons and tons of children. And um, some of them made it and left for whatever other places they were going to be sent to. Um, some of them were buried in the yard. So I've always said to people, my dream, there's a machine. President Trump had said that he wanted to return all the children to their parents. And there's a machine that will discover bones, like archaeologists will use it. And I looked into this. You can rent it for like $1,000. It'll come to mind, but it's like a scanner, like people hunt for gold or silver or coins or something. It's like that, but it's for bones that archaeologists use. And so my dream is that the neighborhoods will get together, especially the older ones, and rent that together. It's like $1,000 a month. Check everybody's yards and basements, because that's how I think we're going to bring a lot of the children home, is to dig up the yards and find their remains. Although I know some of them are cremated. But so children would be buried in the yard, and then so many too were sent to the university. And at the university, they were separated into children that had homes to go to and those that didn't. And the ones that didn't have homes were ultimately executed in the end. So that was, yeah, my childhood.
Oh my gosh, that's so horrific. All the people and so many adults are there and not one stood up to protect these children. All
Yep.
were predators, and that's horrific. We talk about the amount of people and the percentage of children that are abused, little kids that are abused. And now we have to think, when you hear about situations like this, it makes my mind go, what's the percentage of people that we walk by every day that are predators, we walk by these people in the grocery store, and then after they leave, they're going to a home like this and renting a child or torturing a child, or maybe it's their home that they're going back to that is housing these different children that are used for these things. It's
Yes.
just, it's horrific to hear these stories and to think about all the people that could have made a difference that didn't, and that they just walked idly through there, went home, did whatever they were going to do after, and their secret was buried with them, and that this just continues to just be perpetuated.
It is. So I'm glad you went there, because I haven't had that I can remember a podcaster go there yet. But yes, that's on my mind too. And it's a topic that just adds to the horrificness of the whole topic. But if you think that so in the United States, the FBI, who's part of the problem, admits that 800,000 children, they call it lost like a set of car keys, but they're kidnapped, executed, raped, tortured. 800,000 just in the United States alone, year after year. So that would be as if Kansas City filled up with children and then they disappeared one year, and it refilled up and they disappeared, or Atlanta, or any big town. Worldwide, it's the size of Hong Kong. So it's as if Hong Kong filled up with children and they all disappeared each year and came back and disappeared. So there are a lot of children. And so you think about the number of perpetrators, it has to be, my educated guess, I would put it 50% of the population. I really would. 50% at least. There was a church survey that was done in churches, and this again was, gosh, maybe 15 years ago. And at that time, 66% of the men looked at porn and 33% of the women. So, what people think about one day they do, and that included child porn. So people for a while will look at porn, and then that's not good enough, and then they have to go out and become a perpetrator. So that's part of the problem too. So there is, yeah, my prayer, I have a prayer that I say all the time, is, or often, I would like tattoos. So I would like a big P for pet. I would like, this is what I asked the Lord to do. I would like a big P for pedophile. So that way we know who we're dealing with, R for rapist, T for thief, just so that way we've got a good understanding of who this person is that we're with, because I believe there would be significant change in leadership and who we all hang out with if we were fully aware. And you mentioned too that people do these things and go home and no one knows. Part of my background is I lead a very spiritual life. And whenever I was little, God was always there, and Jesus was always there, and there were angels and demons, and I went to heaven a lot, and I still do. I still see God. He's still here. I still see Jesus. Now I see Holy Spirit because I'm a born again Christian. Holy Spirit was not there because no one there was a born again Christian. And I still go to heaven. So I live a very spiritual, supernatural life too as a result of this. And these evil people think that they're doing these heinous things to children. They wouldn't call it heinous, that's my word. And behind closed doors where no one knows, but God is there. And he does have a book. It's mentioned in Revelation, and he writes in the book because he sees everything that's going on and knows exactly what they're doing. And they will be judged for that in this world or the next, or both. So and it always astounded me that they never saw those things, but of course they couldn't because they worship a different God. They worship Satan. But yeah, God is fully aware, and he was there fully helping the children.
Yes, and one of the other shocking things that you brought up is thinking about somebody who, we go back to military and how many, the percentage that could have been abused. But then you look on the other side and how perpetrators can also be hiding in the military. And that is just shocking when you hear these stories. And that I think the other thing that society has hung up on is we see these Hollywood movies that portray kidnappers and traffickers to be sort of these like gritty looking homeless people that you could point at and be like, they're definitely a predator. When in fact, they are people that are in our military. They are people that could sit in courtrooms and that we vote for in politics, and that could be the pharmacist in our community or the grocery store owner or the butcher, whoever it is, these are usually people that we walk by every day and sometimes even really respect. These aren't your typical people that you'd look at and be like, oh, they look creepy and they're a predator. These are people that, we tend to hold in high esteem and that look completely normal to us. And it's just shocking to hear that that's in your story as well.
The pastor, the teacher, the law enforcement officer, the military personnel, the business owner, the all walks of life. So the area doctor was in the trafficking house. He would give the drugs to the children. And so it's everybody. There is not any part of society that this hasn't touched or impacted. Um, which is why part of what I like to speak to is warning to the parents. This is so prevalent, and it only takes a second to permanently harm your child and ruin your life forever too, because the child is so severely harmed. It's what will lead to the alcoholism, the drug addiction, the suicides, the prison, the all of these things. That's why when pedophiles are in prison, they're normally executed by the inmates pretty quickly because practically all of the inmates were harmed as children. And adults make their own choices, but eventually that, can lead to the things that got them in prison in the first place, too. But they do come from all walks of life. And so when, I'll see children, parents just let their children stay at a neighbor's house or, their best friend's house. Well, you honestly don't know. And you don't know the uncle that might come visit or the cousin that might come visit, or you don't know what that their brother has just been through and that he's going to bring home. You don't know. And I'm very, very worried about the MK Ultra that the parents are under, letting their children just the great amount of trust. This is not the time for this age that we live in with all the exposure. I believe this could start being curbed more if the parents would um, protect the children.
Absolutely. And another thing your story corroborates is unsuspecting locations, a house in a normal community or what would look normal, a house that people probably drive by and see all the time and could never imagine what was going on in it. And then you mentioned a university, children being taken to somewhere like a university and being tortured and put through this conditioning when this is supposed to be a safe space that students can go learn and that is usually acclaimed and people pay a lot of money to go there, not knowing that there's these really horrific things happening right on the same campus at the same time. It's such a deception. Can you talk a little bit about your conditioning? What were they using you for, and at what age were you starting to be taken to this university?
Sure. So as far as I know, it could have been as early as 2 years old, but definitely by 3 years old, I was taken. And I have memories of a man from the government coming to the house and mom writing him a check to take me to camp. And I'll put that in air quotes. They called it camp. And I believe that was part of mom's delusion of, because she knew exactly what she was doing, but I believe that was part of the make-believe world to try to justify what she knew she was doing to me. And so then the government person, and of course now when I say government, we have so many documents that have been between Kathy O'Brien, and she'll talk about the CIA, MK Ultra mind control programs. Dr. Juliet Engel, she'll talk about in December of 2024, the National Security Archive released 1,200 pages of never before released CIA documents about what was happening at the U.S. University medical centers. And I gave those to Kathy O'Brien because so much information can be regurgitated. And so I asked her, she's seen everything, all these documents, because she testified before Congress. And I said, Kathy, I said, are these new or is this old information? And she looked and she said, this is brand new. She said, I have never seen this before. So it is brand new information. And people can go there, the National Security Archives, and they can see it. But in it, the CIA admits to um, taking the U.S. University medical centers and building annexes on, as well as tunnels, to torture U.S. citizens. They admit to it. And their purpose of the torture was mind control. They admit to that. And as a matter of fact, Kathy O'Brien was under oath, I think maybe in the 80s, talking about that, but it's still going on. It is still, they have not stopped because when the CIA was called before Congress and they admitted to it, they said, oops, never mind, didn't mean it. And they got a slap on the hand, no accountability. And so it continued. But in these documents, it names universities. And, your viewers have named universities. There's a whole list now going on. And frankly, I'm going to say every university USA by now and worldwide. I've heard too many. I've seen too many. I am hard pressed to believe that any are exempt from this. So our tax dollars built these facilities. And in these facilities, the CIA said their whole purpose was to do mind control. So again, you get back to World War II that we lost, and our government imported the Nazis. Dr. Juliet Engel will talk about that because her family is the one that imported the Nazis. And they put them in every part of society, including our medical system for this part of our conversation and the universities. So the CIA wanted to experiment doing MK Ultra on U.S. citizens, adults, and children. So they used our tax dollars to build these facilities. The universities were glad to do it. Money. I just think I have a podcast on my show I call Money, 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 because I saw myself sold for money all the time. I saw the other children sold for money. The belief system people have about this love of money is incomprehensible to me, that there's something they think they can do with money that is so wonderful that they're willing to torture and murder and execute fellow human beings. It's beyond the pale, incredulous to me. So in these government facilities, the CIA started recruiting medical professionals. And they'll talk about in the documents, they only wanted the best of the best in the United States. They wanted the best of the best to do mind control experimentation on US citizens. They'll talk about how they started going to the medical professionals. And at first, a few were like, this doesn't sound ethical, torturing US citizens. I mean, it doesn't sound right, government. But they found that the vast majority were more than willing to participate in these experiments because to further science and go where no man had ever gone before. You'll hear that a lot, which, implicates to our, that's old Star Trek phrase, which implicates to Hollywood in all of this. So they started the experimentation, and that included the children. So whenever I went, the government employee, CIA, came to get me. And I remember being put in a car and I was drugged, knocked out, and hooded. So when I got to the university, now here's something that I find, this is the God, this is God, this is the God we serve. They thought that they could electrocute my mind and drug my mind to where I would never remember this. And then they thought even if I did remember, I wouldn't be able to speak. And then if I would be able to speak, nobody would listen or believe me. But God. See, they don't have God. They a lot of them, I believe, are soulless. They worship Satan if they worship anything. So they don't count God in this. So because as an adult, when I remember this, it was so easy for me to research and figure out which university. It was just so easy because I could see it. Because when you go through this torture, you have a photographic memory. Photographic memory. all your senses. Matter of fact, whenever I'll have a repressed memory come back, often with me through a body memory, I can see, smell it, I see it, I taste it, all the senses. I can feel it physically. My body will morph. I'll have wrist restraints show up. I'll have IV marks show up. My body will morph into what it was like then. And that's part of how I remember. So, so I know exactly where I was. And so when I would arrive there, there were children everywhere. I mean, tons of children at this university. And we were taken to what appeared what would be the Performing Arts Center. And the children that were with me, I don't think any of them were over probably 7 years old, I would think at the oldest. And they were everywhere. And I remember women, like when you go into the performing arts, there are adults organizing everyone, like if you're going for a show. So there'd be adults organizing the children, and the ones who did not have a home to go to were put in this area, and the ones who did have a home to go to were put in this area. And then the next thing that happened would be we would be on the stage performing for the pedophiles. And well, money changing. So the little girl in me would call it the money changing tables because there would be tables set up like you'd see the foldable tables anywhere you go for an event to collect money. And the pedophiles would arrive and they would pay the money. And so you'd sit there and I was perpetually watching myself be sold. Matter of fact, to this day, money can be a really big trigger to me. I have lots of things I do to help myself with that, but that's still a pretty bad one. And so they would pay, and everyone would take their seats, and then the children would perform on stage, a bunch of children at once, and the pedophiles would buy and pick which child they wanted. So it was like a slave auction, is my best way to describe it. Only more of a dancing slave auction, which is why I get so appalled today whenever I see the sexualization of the children. I've gone to cheerleading competitions. I've gone to regional ones. I've gone to, with friends and family, little ones. I've gone to dance competitions. And, when I was little, pedophiles had to pay to see that. And now they don't. The sexualization of our children is horrific. So anyway, everybody would perform, the pedophiles would pick us, and then they would set up beds. My memory reminds me of what you'd see as a gym today. And there would just be rows and rows and rows of beds. And then at night, you could hear the pedophiles walking through and giggling and laughing. And then they would pick the child that they wanted and do what pedophiles do. And that was the evening. And then the next day, we were all taken underground to the laboratory. And people have a hard time with this. But the first thing I would send you to is the National Security Archives. The CIA admits to it. So first of all, there's nothing to have a hard time about because they have admitted to it. But most people are aware, like the Pentagon, I think, is 19 stories below ground. When I remember when Israel was attacked in October of the year before last year, they showed in Israel all of the medical facilities underground. They were like full-blown hospitals underground. You can find pictures of them online now in their tunnels. When people think tunnels, they think mining shafts, and it's not like that. It's like having whatever's above ground is below ground, same exact. The military. I was on a podcast a month or so ago, and her husband, the podcaster, was a high-level person in the military. And he would talk about all the deep underground military bases and the transportation systems, the speed rails, the light trains underground. So but the military, of course, they won't talk about these things, but he told his wife. So now she's sharing, as a truther. So this stuff is all underground. And so the children that did, I had a home to go to. And the ones that did not have a home to go to, if you can imagine rows and rows and rows and rows and rows and rows of children, and they were on metal surgical beds, and they would have IVs coming out of them for the adrenochrome harvesting. And then no anesthesia, because these people, they're not like us. Kathy O'Brien says that phrase a lot, and I borrowed it. They are not like us. And this comes from the concentration camps. So this is what I've done interviews with Holocaust survivors. This comes from the concentration camps. This is what they did to the children and the adults in the concentration camps. They're not like us. They didn't use anesthesia then. That's who we imported over, our government. They don't use it now. And once the adrenochrome, they'd gotten as much as they could there, then they do the organ harvesting. And it's live organ harvesting, just like people have heard about. Until, and I call it execution, until the children are gone and they don't waste any part with what they want to sell. They are not like us. And for my part, because I had a home to go to, it was different. So I was in a dental chair, and to this day, I have to really work hard whenever I need to see a dentist to not be triggered. But so I was in a dental chair, and the medical staff were there from above ground. And so there was a doctor, a nurse, usually a med tech. They were fully garbed, so in like surgical clothing, so the surgical hat, the little plastic thing, and the mask, and the fully garbed. The government, the CIA was there also, not garbed. They were all in their suits. It's just stuff that just photographic memory, and they were standing around watching. And then there were big flat screen TVs where other people were watching, which I'm assuming is more CIA, more government. So, and then the experimentation would start. And that would be, so for me, the adrenochrome harvesting was part of it because they're not going to waste that opportunity. And then it was all the MK Ultra mind control, where I remember having a device on my head and wires coming out of it hooked to machines. It'd be like people getting EKGs and things today. I had wires all over me and they were hooked to machines. And then while I was tortured in various ways, they would watch the machines to see when they did this, what was the reaction to my body, what was the reaction to my mind. And they were doing that at the time to further refine MK Ultra. And anyone who lived through COVID understands that was an MK Ultra event, because what they do is, so above ground with COVID, they do something to terrorize people, put abject fear in them that they're going to die. So, that's what they did in COVID. And then when they have people good and scared, then they give them the solution. And people are willing to do things to harm themselves and others that they never would have done before. So during COVID, that vaccine was a bioweapon, and COVID was a bioweapon. And so people were making their loved ones, you take this biological weapon that's going to kill or maim you, or you can't come to Christmas. I experienced that, and so many people did. And that is MK Ultra. We lived that because they terrorized people so much and then gave them the solution. It's like, if you do this, you'll be, I won't hurt you anymore. If you take the jab, we can all come out of COVID. You can come out of your homes. You can take your masks off. Well, that wasn't the plan. It's never the plan. It was for more and more and more. So that's MK Ultra. So whenever I was little, they were developing the technique underground for the day to bring it above ground. And COVID was the first operation. So below ground, they would give me, I was repeatedly drugged, and they would test different drugs. The big pharma we have today is based on what they did to the children. Kathleen O'Brien, I've talked about this. So with big pharma, all those side effects, with the children, they would experiment to see how much of a drug they could give someone until it killed them, and then back that off a bit, and then have all of those side effects, because that created a long-term customer where they enjoy this, where they can slowly kill you and make your life miserable and give you those side effects until, and money, it's all about money, take your money until you're finally gone. So part of it was pharmaceutical development. Part of it was the MK Ultra. So whenever I would be there for an activity or a time period, when it was over, the torture, whatever they did to me, I would have to remember in vivid detail everything that they did, in vivid detail. And I watched an ex-military guy on Michael Jaco's show, Nathan, talk about the same thing. They do it they experimented on him in the military. He told the same story. It's always wonderful when you meet a kindred spirit. It's like, ah, yes, yeah, that happened to me too. And so what they would, so every time I remembered something, they'd electrocute my brain. So in the instruments, they could see where the memory was in the brain and they'd fry it. And so so that I wouldn't remember. And so every incident, and I mean, it was a torturous event because I was 3. I didn't know why I had to do this. I didn't know why I was going to be tortured and hurt even more severely if I didn't tell them every little detail. I couldn't. It's so unfathomable. But I would do that, and so every memory, they'd watch the monitor and electrocute me and fry my brain and fry my brain and fry my brain at the exact memory point, so I wouldn't remember. And then they would also just do electrocution because it's part of the torture to see what it does to the body. Give me drugs, part of the torture. And some of this was just sheer pleasure. I mean, they just they enjoyed inflicting as much physical pain as they could in as many ways as they could imagine just to see my reaction. And I remember one time they did kill me. I'm not sure if it was an overdose or how, but what I do remember was I remember um, I was over my body. You'll hear the stories of people who die, how they're gone. And so I was floating over my body, and my body was dead on a gurney, being rushed down a hospital like you'd see in a movie, rushed down the corridor of a hospital, going I'm not sure where. But even at that, they were fascinated watching their monitors, seeing what was happening to them. I was a big experiment. I was a big experiment to them. I was not a person. I was never a human being in any of this. I was a big experiment. And so I was dead. And they were still monitoring what was happening to me. And then they were able to bring me back. I mean, here I am today. So that was the underground part of it, and I would go there several times.
And so, what would kind of a typical week look like for you? How often were you home? How often were you at this other home that was facilitating this trafficking ring? And how often were you at other locations such as the university?
So I wasn't at home that often. I don't remember being at home that often. What is a lot more vivid to me is so at a minimum, every day I was at the trafficking house. I'm sure most nights. With the university, I'm not sure if I was there once a month or but I was there often. And then on top of that, I would also be at satanic ritualistic events, and that includes at the national level. At least the more I talk, I've always said national. It could be international for all I know. The more I hear the international people speaking, but I would be taken there too. And I don't think that was that often because I don't have as many memories there. However, those were some of the most horrific memories that I do have. And so it's possible that I just haven't remembered yet because I'm still remembering things. I think so much happened. I think I'll be doing this. I don't think it's ever going to stop, although it's slowing down, praise God. But I'm not sure it's ever going to stop.
And was it the same people at the trafficking home that would facilitate the satanic ritual abuse as well?
No, the trafficking home, I would call them, so in the local and the kind of regional area, when it came to the satanic ritualistic abuse, my best description is the men that were involved reminded me of the high school nerds. That would be a good description. The women were mean. I mean, they were like battle axe mean. They were big and tough and strong and firm and mean, mean, mean women. Now, at the national level, they were very scary people. So if you can imagine, so they hold their national conventions just like we do, but theirs are very, very different. And theirs are underground. And if you picture like a stadium with the floors are slanting down to the stage, and so the arena is filled, theater seats, and it goes down to the stage where the ritual rituals, abuse, sacrifices are performed. And there, it was all men that were in charge. They were scary. They were so scary that I can remember freezing in place. And I didn't do that. I mean, I was well trained. I was very well trained. By the time I was 3, I was a leader, and I was very well trained. And these people scared me to where I just remember I would just freeze. But they were men, and they were dressed in. I remember talking about this on a show where I was with Dr. Juliet Engel, and I just watched her go like this. I thought, oh yeah, you saw that too, right? Of course she did. But they were dressed in. It reminded me of the garb that you see like at the Vatican, and during like a high ceremony, where they have the like super starched satiny stuff that looks like boards that they're wearing. It's so crisp and no wrinkle, no flow. So they had on that garb, head to toe, gown. I don't know what you call it. Doesn't have, it's not pants. And it would be red, like the color of blood when you first see it, the bright, bright red. And long robes with their and with the big sleeves that hang down. And then their hat that would be pointy. And then they would have these ear things that were pretty wide that would go down either side. And they would be men only, and serious, serious, serious men. I have never seen men so serious like that before or after. Like I said, it was so frightening. I would freeze in place by them because the whole thing was frightening. So I'm not sure how often that happened because those memories are the worst of the worst for me. So I might be repressing quite a bit of those still.
Yeah, which is very natural. It's healthy that our bodies do that and sort of know when to present that information to us when we're ready, if we're safe enough, in our environments, and really incredible how our mind works that way. But you have so many memories, so, and I'm sure just getting little glimpses of that is enough, for you to sort of understand what was
Yes,
going on in those instances, especially hearing people out there who do have complete memories who can speak on it. It's sort of the same playbook every time. It's absolutely horrific what they do at these things. And, to think about being a little tiny child and witnessing this is just so impossible to comprehend, So it's like, no wonder our souls kind of leave our body in those moments and shove those memories down. How could a child possibly live seeing that over and over again in their conscious memory?
it is a gift. I mean, it is an absolute gift. The Especially when the memories go. I did not have my first, especially when they're repressed. I didn't have my first repressed memory until 2011. And, like I said, I remembered about 5%, but it was a gift from God to erase the rest of it until I was safe, like you said. So I was finally safe. And safe for me was I had married, I just call him not a nice man at all. And I was divorced. So I was away from people who would harm me. I was in a place where I lived. I was safe. At that time, God had asked me to attend Al-Anon. And anytime the Lord asked me to do something, I do it because it's for part of my healing. So I was there for about 5 years because of alcoholism. My dad was never home. He was an alcoholic and a workaholic. He had no idea what was going on. So the alcoholism was pervasive on both sides, actually, because my mother's father, the grandfather that got my grandmother pregnant when she was 13 behind a barn, he was an alcoholic. So everybody's an alcoholic. So I was in Allen at the time. So I had a group of people that I didn't talk about my childhood. I didn't remember most of it at that time. And then I had my therapist because I was going through a divorce. And God is so good how he goes before us to get everything prepared, when we don't even know, we need it, and then it is. So when I had the first repressed memory, turns out she's a nationwide trauma therapist. I didn't know that. Didn't know that. I'd gone to her to help me through the divorce. But so she was right there with what I consider the best technique in the country to help people EMDR. And so I had my first repressed memory. I was just in my house putting on my makeup at my makeup table, just something very, very simple, just going about my day. And it hit. And I remembered, and out of the blue. And I remembered being in the crib, and I remembered what he smelled like and what he looked like. I can see his buttons, I can see the shirt, I can see the colors, I can see the pattern of my crib. I mean, all of it, all of it, all of it. And it shocked me. Um, so I understand people getting shocked when they hear the stories that I tell, because I was shocked with that first one myself. Dropped me to my knees in a puddle, crying. I just, just in a puddle, crying, out of control. Well, not out of control, no control. I was devastated. And that day I had to go somewhere. So I was driving in my car and I was talking to the Lord about it, because I really didn't like the fact that I remembered, and I thought he could have stopped that. So I was talking to him about it, and I said, God, I said, I could have lived a lifetime and never remembered that. And I was just talking to him about it. And right when I said that, I looked up, which is a very good thing to do when you're in trouble. And there was a giant billboard, and all it said was, "It's never too late." Yeah, I love the way God talks. He can talk to us in so many different ways. He wants us all to hear from him. So anyway, then I knew it's never too late. And little did I know that that was the first of a bazillion horrific memories. But yeah, that's when the repressed memories started, and they've been here ever since.
It's so interesting how memory repression can happen, and that's one of the biggest things that people say to survivors is, why did you wait so long to talk about it? Well, of course, there's many reasons. Even if you remember your memories, there's a lot of reasons why maybe you don't talk about it, and safety and being protected is the biggest one, right? But it's so
Yeah,
fascinating to
yeah.
me how our brains and minds, how we can go function and live normally and do all these things, start businesses, go to school, have relationships, get married, be a parent, and your body knows that you're not safe unconsciously, even if you consciously think you are, and then all of a sudden you let go of these things like a toxic marriage or family members that could possibly still be there and that could provide, some type of unsafe environment for you to be in or to talk about it, or you move into a home that's by yourself and all of a sudden you're not around toxicity with other people. And all of a sudden, these parts of our consciousness feel safe to come out and disclose information that they've been just holding on to for all those years. It's just amazing how that happens.
It is amazing. My therapist has a phrase, the mind forgets, but the body remembers.
Yes.
And so that's how it's been with me with repressed memories. I've had so many things. As a marathoner, I run all the time. And I remember one day I was just running along doing my thing, and I can be triggered by anything, a doorknob, a voice, a face, a chair. It doesn't matter. It has nothing to do with the person or thing that's triggering me. It's time. So the way I look at it is, it's God's way of saying, you can handle this now. It's okay. I'm here. You can handle this memory now. So I was running along, something triggered me, and all of a sudden I lost the ability to use my right leg. I couldn't use it. And so I had to drag my leg home. I had to, I can't run if I can't use my right leg. So I drug it home, and I drug it around the house until I could get to my therapist. And, I mentioned the number one technique that she uses is EMDR, which I think is amazing. It's helped me so much. And so we processed out that trauma, and that involves, I remember in a safe environment. I remember all of it. And then I can process out the emotion, so I can talk to you today without just being in a heap of tears in the floor. I can share it without all of the rest. And so what it was in the trafficking house, the grandfather had in the basement where most of the torture occurred, he had on the wall hanging all kinds of sizes of casts for legs. And so the children wouldn't run away. We'd have to wear a cast on our right leg and drag that leg around the house. So that's what that was. And that's how I remembered. And this can happen to me, like I remember one time I was going about my business, and all of a sudden I couldn't see out of my left eye. I couldn't see a thing. Just could not see a thing. And God is so good. The night before, I'd watched an old Helen Keller movie. She was blind. She's like a classic story of a woman who started out as a child as horrific, and then became this eloquent speaker and writer and things as an adult blind. And so I just seen the movie. And so I love how God prepares me for these things. So it's not quite so shocking. And so when I completely lost my vision in my eye, I didn't freak out. I just knew it was some sort of a trauma. And, sure enough, whenever I got to my therapist, I remember I was in a business meeting one time, and my client, she said something. It was some tone of voice. It was innocent. It doesn't even matter. It has nothing to do with her. And all of a sudden, I lost 80% of my hearing. I could not hear. And so I had to sit there. And so as you shared, I mean, I'm an international human resource consultant during the day. It's my day job. And so I had to really focus. And because we were interviewing candidates from around the country for a really critical management job, I had to really focus and concentrate and try to hear. And I'm able to, when I choose to, hide everything I feel and think so no one knows anything, because I learned that as a child. It was a survival technique that people, because you were tortured to do that, to not show what you were feeling and thinking, and to instead show what you were trained to show. So I know this part well. And so they never knew it was going on, but I couldn't hear until, again, I could process it out. And I remember one time, it's not funny, but this is how far along the road I've healed. I mean, that just goes to show you, too, how I've processed this out. But so I was drugged so heavily when I was still trying to sort through what was happening to me. I had a doctor say, um, because I hadn't remembered yet, I hadn't gotten to the point where I was hardly fed anything. So I have lots of intestinal problems because of that when I eat food, because my food, I didn't grow up the first 5 years processing food. And so, matter of fact, my mom would laugh around the kitchen table at meals saying, "Well, that's just so funny. You only wanted milk until you were 4 years old, bottled milk in a bottle." And that was just the family story. Like, Lynn, it's like I mean, imagine that. Telling a 4-year-old she's at fault because she didn't want food. I mean, who says that? Anyway. So my body doesn't process. So anyway, I was having all these problems. And so I finally had a doctor, and this was before I remembered the tunnels, or I don't see doctors a lot now. But um, they said, you need a colonoscopy. So if anyone has ever had one of those, they'll know exactly what the rest of this should be like. So you have to drink this horrid tasting drink and a bunch of it. And to say this in the most polite way possible, it's to clean out your system. So once you drink that, it's almost like your system cleans out thoroughly, a lot of it with a blowtorch. That's the best way I can describe it. I'm just saying. What happened to me? I got high and then I passed out. Now, that's not normal. And anyone listening to me who's had that procedure, they know that is not what happens. You live in the bathroom, you can't leave the house. It's just a horrific kind of event, to get your intestines cleaned out. I got high. That stuff doesn't make you high, but it was drugs. My body, it was another body memory. So clearly I was given liquid to drink, and for whatever reason. So that's how my body is. And I mentioned before, I woke up one morning and I had IVs, marks in my arms. And then that led me to more memories in the lab. So to this day, I never do know what is going to happen to me physically. Whenever I remember one day I'd gone to a lake to do some work, and I got home and I couldn't breathe. And I felt like someone had placed a boulder on my chest, and I could not breathe. And I was really getting worried about it because it was so horrific. And whenever I got help, what had happened was a lot of the children, how they got rid of them was they would put them in bodies of water with boulders on them so they wouldn't float to the top. So it was another way to bury and get rid of the children. And I watched that, but part of the torture is they do you watch them kill children, and then they say, if you don't do whatever horrific thing they want you to do, then we're going to do that to you. And, and then they'll also pretend to do it to really put the fear in you to get you to be compliant. It's all about compliance. And so after I watched that happen to the children, then they put me in the water with a boulder on my chest, but not in deep enough water to drown. But I was too little to know the difference. So when I went to the lake, it triggered that memory, which triggered, so that's how I live my life. And that's how I remember. And I never do know um, how often that's going to happen. It can be every day. It can be the more I heal and the more I remember, maybe every 2 or 3 days, I'll have a real big bad one like that. But that's what these people do to the children. So again, I share this not to just share stories. My purpose in this is what happens to the children. And if you survive as an adult, you have a lifetime sentence to still try to survive, while unfortunately many of the perpetrators and pedophiles go scot-free and continue harming the children.
Absolutely. You couldn't be more right about that. During your healing, did you have any memories? You're obviously a very spiritual person. I can tell that you're very in touch with higher realms of consciousness and just very spiritual as a human. Did they notice that in you and experiment on you spiritually as well with psychic abilities or remote viewing, any of those types of things that you hear a lot in these testimonies?
So they must have, yes. So today I do have remote viewing capabilities, and I do have the ability to I understand animals. So what they're thinking, how they're feeling, and uh, uh, and plants too, trees. I can understand. Um, and so the answer is yes. And how much of that is them and how much of that is from God is still something, because I'm still sorting through with the Lord. And because I know I'm extremely strong, and I was as a little girl too, and I still am as an adult. And I heard someone say one time that I got strong because of what they did to me. And I asked God, and He said, no, He said, I made you strong. He said, it had nothing to do with them. You would have been strong anyway. It's who you are. And especially as we go into our golden age that we're entering, there's so much healing to be done on the planet and the aftercare for this. And I believe that we are going to see justice, and then we'll be rebuilding our nation and our world the way that we want it to be. So we need these gifts. We need these gifts. I have a friend who is a deeply spiritual man, and he is both deaf and blind, and he can remote view before people pass and see their soul. And he's able to help guide them to get rid of what they need to get rid of in their soul to be able to go to heaven. And so I believe that these gifts aren't something that, because of the torture they taught us to do or trained us to do. I believe that because of what they were doing, the gifts that are in all of us were able to come out earlier. That's where I am at on that whole conversation. So my abilities, I can also talk to weather. Jesus did it. So, and Jesus says in the New Testament, we'll do even greater things. So talking to weather is nothing. That's on the basic level of what a faith-filled person should be able to do, because Jesus calmed the wind and the waves. And I discovered that one day I was out running. I just read that scripture that morning in my Bible study. I spend 2 to 4 hours a morning in Bible study, prayer time, meditation, talking to the Lord. And I have forever. It's a large part of my healing process. And I just read that story. So I was out running, and I don't run in two conditions, ice and lightning. Those are times I stay
Smart.
indoors. So I was out running, and I was probably 3 miles from home, and it started lightning. And I thought, no, we're not going to do this. I'm out running. I'm not going to be hit by lightning. So I started talking to it and commanding it, just like Jesus. Jesus said, that I can command you. So as soon as I did that, it stopped. And I ran home. And the minute my foot hit the step, it started again. And that was my first time I discovered I could do this. So when I run now, I started talking to it. And the weather is a being, it's an entity in the spirit realm. God says it lives in storehouses, so it has a home. And I remember the first time I did it, it was shocked. I'm not sure if anyone's talked to it since Jesus did. I don't know. But so I will. And I'll ask for a breeze when I run. When I run, it's not uncommon for me to get breezes north, south, east, and west to make me comfortable because I want to be comfortable when I run, especially, it can get up to 100. Um, so that trees. I have a tree outside my window that we'll have conversations. One time I was outside and I took a video of this. I need to put it on a podcast because people will enjoy this. But I was out by the tree and all of a sudden a leaf came off and started dancing. I have a video and it comes off and it at first I thought it's blowing in the wind, leaves blowing in the wind, but it stayed there and it would twirl and spin and then it would go this way and it would go that way and it would go up. And I just watched it. I just watched it dance. I felt like it was dancing before the Lord. I mean, leaves don't do that. And the wind doesn't blow in circles. And it did that until a car came and then bam, went right down and it stopped. So, so those are things that I believe, and even today, so I saw angels all the time whenever I was little, and I still see them. So, they bake chocolate in my kitchen. So angels love chocolate. I'll just tell people, spoiler alert till you get to heaven. And I will smell them baking chocolate in the kitchen. They love coffee too. It's like a coffee shop. I'm not doing anything. I'm just sitting here minding my own business. My kitchen's that way, so that's why I look that way. And there'll be, coffee and chocolate, and they love that. One time, I was at one time, God asked me to go to Celebrate Recovery for Healing. So I went there for a year or two. And it's like a 12-step program in churches. And I was in worship service. They do worship before you break out into small groups. And all of a sudden, I saw sentries beside me. And I have them with me all the time. I have a lot of angels. I always have. But they're really tall. And angels are, the warrior angels are male, and the mothering angels are female. Each child had a female mothering angel with them that I could see, both in the trafficking house and in the lab. So every child I mentioned on the table, I want to give people some hope. They each had an angel. And the mothering angels were women, and they were in beautiful white gowns and long, beautiful hair and their wings, and they would touch the children. And the little girl in me would call them the shh, shh angels, like they're there. They were very comforting, like a good mother, I imagine is. And there's something in their hands that heal and soothe, so the children don't feel as much. Because I know I had them too. They were very soothing. Um, and I'm fully convinced that they were the same angels in the Garden of Gethsemane with Jesus, soothing him. Because it says in scripture, he could have called a legion. I've seen the legion. The host of heaven, they're behind me a lot. I can hear their heels click sometimes. They were army boots and beautiful clothing and wings. But Jesus could have called them and he didn't. But he was soothed and comforted. I think it was the female mothering angels. So anyway, the male angels are the warrior angels, and they're big. And most of them are probably 7 or 8 feet tall, probably 8 feet tall. And except I've seen some, whenever I pray protection over our nation, for example, I've seen them like with the foot as big as the state of Florida. So they can get like really big. But the ones I would see in the trafficking houses were probably 8, 9 feet tall and in the tunnels. And so today, so okay, so the sentries, I was at Celebrate Recovery, And all of a sudden I saw one right to my I knew I had two, and they're like hugged to my body. I mean, I'm like super protected. And Holy Spirit said they're called sentries, Sentries, which is I researched it. It's the old spelling of that word. And 8, 9 feet tall. Angels are dressed in beautiful white garb, like Roman soldier attire, gold and silver um, designs and trim, big, beautiful weapons. They love swords and spears. And so I saw the one on the left, I felt the one on the right. And the next morning I went out to run. And when I run and cars are driving by, it's pretty common for them to stare because I'm a running object. Well, I mean, I'm a moving object. So I was a few blocks out of my neighborhood, and because of what I've gone through, I have 44 times the visual acuity of those who aren't tortured. Kathy O'Brien talks about that. Um, I also have 44 times the auditory acuity, so I see a lot of things others don't. So when I was running, there was a car, and I knew that he was a terrorist from the Middle East in my neighborhood. And because we know that they're in the United States, but spoiler alert, I've seen embedded military personnel everywhere. So if there's some type of a terrorist thing that happens, I don't want people to be afraid, because President Trump didn't just throw up his hands and say, oops, oh no, we're going to be attacked. He embedded our military in our communities too, because I've seen them and they've started talking to me too. But anyway, so this day I was running, and I knew what I was seeing. And I was running right at this man, and it was my running path. And he didn't see me, he wasn't looking up. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's a terrorist. And when I see them, we have power, dominion, and authority to bind their demons that make them do things to render them powerless. So I was doing my thing. The next thing I knew, that sentry on the right that I hadn't seen, I saw his big arm, and he put it like that, and he blocked that man's view. That man couldn't see me at all. And I knew he couldn't see me. And all I saw the angel was his arm. And I looked at him, and he looked shocked. I'm not sure anyone had ever seen him. And I wasn't supposed to be able to see him because, there's supposed to be a veil over some things, but that's removed from me, a lot. So, that is my life. That's what I saw when I was little. It's what I see now, and including Jesus and going to heaven, because I still do see them. I still do see God, and they're very, very real. And the way I net out is this experience, the remote viewing, the all of this we can all have. It's just they've taken that from us. The fluoride in the water, for example, all the chemicals, the drugs were given. Our food isn't food. They call it food and it's not food. So our bodies are starving for nutrients. They've done all these things to block our spirit, our ability to be and see the Lord and everything in the supernatural, because they'd lose. These evil Luciferian Satanists would lose if we all knew the power, dominion, and authority that we had. So I think they worked just as hard to keep us dummied down. So I believe God did all that, gave me all those gifts.
And I love that you're using that in an empowering way and sharing that because, in my opinion, from what I've heard, I'm convinced that these programs were using children that they selected because of these gifts that they have, because of the higher propensity to have a higher IQ, to be more in touch with the spiritual realm. Children that could dissociate more and use the power of our bodies in a more powerful way than some children could, that they could overcome and survive things that, the average human can't. And unfortunately, in the same breath, they're convincing everybody and all these children and humans that go through these programs that you're worthless, that they control you, that you don't have the freedom, that they've created you, that everything that is good about you belongs to them, and that they're the only ones that can use it for whatever they want. They completely strip you of that confidence in what you were born in. And what they do is they take those gifts and exploit them for dark purposes instead of for what God intended them for. And I really love that you're able to see that because I think a lot of survivors still carry a lot of shame from the way that their the things that make them special and the things that should have been fostered in a positive way by caring and compassionate and loving adults was exploited with them, that they carry that shame of what those things were used for, when if they wouldn't have been put through those programs, they could have used those gifts for things that were really beautiful to help humanity, to help progress humanity, and that it's not too late to still do that, that those gifts still make them special, and that that's amazing that God gives us those things, that people can just naturally do something like remote view or talk to God or even dissociate. You know, those are all really beautiful things that God gave us as gifts and as ways to protect ourselves, to enhance humanity. And unfortunately, it's such a deep-seated thing with people where they carry a lot of shame for what those things were used for. And so I really appreciate your words of encouragement to survivors, because that's my hope too, is that they realized how special they were and that they weren't just these random kids that were chosen. These were children that they recognized things in and used those things in a really dark way. But they wouldn't have chosen a lot of these kids if they didn't have those really special abilities that should have been used for something to help them grow into productive adults, you know, and children that could have been used, that could have had these gifts used for things that were good whenever they were young.
Oh, absolutely. So when like for example, so I love that. And I do want to encourage all the survivors to do an inventory of your supernatural gifts. So this is Gracie, by the way. She
It's
loves
so
podcasts.
cute, yes.
She's been on a nap. So see if this is what I'm working with.
Oh, that's
So
adorable.
I just have to make sure that she doesn't touch any buttons. But she's hot me off podcast before too. But the gifts, I encourage people to look at their gifts, their supernatural abilities, and start working with the Lord and practicing honing those. So weather, I'm just going to talk about that one. So I told you the first day I discovered that I could control weather. And I had scripture based on it. It wasn't some woo-woo thing. You know, Jesus did it and said we could do more things. So I thought, okay, great. I'm on solid ground. So I practice. Well, with Hurricane Milton, when that came last year, I have friends in Florida, and Milton was getting ready to hit. And I looked at the weather patterns, and you know, with the weather warfare that we have, and like for example, Texas, that was pure weather warfare would just hit there, pure weather warfare, and planned. So I looked at the weather patterns, and before man-made weather appears, it'll make a shape. And I can't remember now if it was a dragon or panda eyes, but anyway, something that was really clearly, they're just sending a signal, you know, that they're doing it. So this time, and we have the most power, dominion, and authority in our home, and with those in our home, then and in our community, neighborhood community. And then it gets a bit weaker the further out we go. I still pray, but it helps if you have friends and loved ones in another geographic area. You have more power, dominion, and authority there too. So I have friends that I love and care for in Florida, and I saw that coming. This time I started commanding weather, and I commanded it to, and I don't just ask nicely. I mean, I'm commanding like a military officer, telling it what it will and will not do. And it didn't work. So that means it's not real, because real weather will listen. So I knew that this was man-made. So then I started commanding angels. We all have angels. And because people don't see them, your angels, for the most part, are standing around with their arms crossed, tapping their toes, waiting for you to ask them to do something, and that's very scriptural too. They're here, they're servants. God sends them to us as servants, and they're here, whether you see them or not. So that's another thing. Be careful what you say, because sometimes you ask them to do things and they're like, really? That's what you want? So just be careful. So anyway, I started commanding angels. That's whenever I saw that big foot over Florida. So I saw an angel standing before Florida to protect it. So it was getting ready to come in as a level 6, whatever that is in hurricane language, and it came in as a 3. So it actually works. And then the other thing that I did was, God told me there's power in praying with a staff, like Moses did in the Old Testament whenever the Israelites escaped from Egypt. And so God told me to get a staff, and I spent a whole day researching where to get it. I ended up getting it from a little general store that's in the mountains of North Carolina. They cut them themselves from the trees. And so I had my staff, and I was on the show with Bishop Jim O'Connor. He's I think he was a major in the Army. There was a demon at West Point in his room. He punched it out, and there's a big stories. You can read all about it everywhere, but he punched the demon. And at that time, Nixon had a psychic, I can't remember her name. They sent her to get rid of it, and that thing threw her out of the room. So Jean Dixon, I think that's it. Anyway, so to this day, that room at West Point shut because nobody can get that demon out. So anyway, Bishop Jim O'Connor, now he's a bishop. He's out in the military, and he's a bishop, and he's an exorcist. So we do a weekly podcast together. And that storm was coming, and he has, we both have the same friends and loved ones in Florida. So he had a staff, and I grabbed my staff, and we started praying spiritual warfare prayers. And that's whenever Tampa Bay went dry. So that's just weather. And that's one example where these are gifts. These are gifts that we have. There's nothing to be ashamed of. I believe it's a normal faith-based experience. And think what we could do. Texas, to prevent that awful thing that just happened in Texas. If there are people who are survivors in that area, or if you're a survivor and you have friends and loved ones there, and you understand the gifts and powers that you've been given, we can stop these things and we can minimize them, if we're just watching and paying attention and using our gifts. So I think that's something, the little girl in me calls it like Spider-Man superpowers. And that's what we have. And as horrific and unspeakable as it was that we went through, we do have gifts. And I, I'm sure you're right. We probably were selected due to that. I know, I have an extremely high IQ. I started my first business when I was 4 years old. So I'm sure we were pre-selected, but we can use that now to win.
Yes, and I love hearing stories of survivors and overcomers who are doing that. There's another survivor I know, heavily used for psychic abilities, and now she's using that to psychically read where ley lines are in the earth, where there's been satanic activity, and she bookmarks them and sends and encourages people to go out there and sing healing frequencies over them and to use instruments. And then I've heard of remote viewers getting together to help other survivors collect information about maybe memories that they don't have a full memory of, say, the inside of a location. And so with some details, they can confirm, oh, you think you were here, but you don't remember what the whole room looks like. You just have these couple details. Let's see if we can all see them for you and confirm that your details are correct. And so you see how these things can be used for such beautiful and incredible healing purposes. And unfortunately, like I said, whether it's pre-selected or however, they're aware that you have these gifts through all the testing, and they use them for their purposes instead of for yours. And so it's really encouraging hearing these miracles that you and others are creating through these gifts, and you're taking your power back. You're completely getting rid of that lie that your agency, that your spiritual gifts, and that your sovereignty belong to somebody else, and that you can take that back now and use it for its intended purpose that God gave to you whenever you were born.
That's right. And I'll to bring it to earthly kind of realms. So another way I use it, I'm a as an international. So hang on, she's doing a big
So
stretch. So
cute.
move her,
So sweet.
lay down. Yes. Yeah. Okay, there we go. Just have to keep her little paws off my keys. So I found her one day. I took a picture. She was sitting here at the laptop looking at it by herself, and I felt like she was doing a little podcast with someone. She looked like she'd learned from me. But anyway, so as a human resource consultant, One of the things that I do today is investigations, legal investigations. So if there's been discrimination, sexual harassment, religious harassment, discrimination harassment, I'll do investigations and I'll get them ready for trial. And so sorry, she was getting nippy. That was, if you saw me give a look, it was too crazy. I gave her the don't do that. Mom says no look. Uh, so I get those ready. So what I have to do is I have to do thorough interviews of people. And because of my childhood, and because I survived this way, I'm able to read people like a large print book under a magnifying glass. And I'm also a human lie detector. So whenever, move her, she's gonna do something she shouldn't. Um, so whenever I talk to people, I can tell by what they say, what they don't say, a word they say, a word they don't say, a small move of the face, a small intonation, I can read people like a large print book under a magnifying glass. And 1000% of the time, I always get my man or woman. And I can document it and I can prove it. And I'm able to tell every lie. And I can list them in a report. They lied 57 times, and here's where they lied. And that's a gift. And so it makes me extremely successful in my line of work. When I hire people, it's the same thing. I can tell people exactly what their gifts are and exactly what their area, I call it areas of opportunity to try to be positive, but their negative traits. And that all comes from my childhood. And I've had people ask, I mean, I do training all the time. Like I do certification training programs and human resources and management training and all kinds of things. But people will say, I want to do it like you do. How do you do that? You know, can you teach me? And in my mind, I think, you don't want the training that it takes to be able to do what I can do. You know, you have no idea what I went through to do what I can do. So the answer is, no, but I'll teach you as best as I can for you to do the very best that you can. But that's a way that God has taken this. You know, there's a scripture that God turns everything for good. So there's a way that He's taken this now. And, I feel like I help humanity when I do that.
Yes, and interestingly, I just want to comment on this. Right behind you, there's a window and it looks like there's a cross. And as you were just talking about God, the sun kind of came in and lit up, and it looked kind of like this little divine intervention of like, yes, Lynn, that's exactly it.
I love it when He does that. Yes, that's cool. I love that.
Me
Yeah.
too. That was neat. Just a little note. It's really, that's like a sign right next to you, which I really love. And so
Yeah.
for you, how long were you in these programs, and how did you, I guess, exit them, or what was your call to liberation in a sense of getting away and becoming a survivor?
So I was whenever I was 4 years old, uh, in that age range. It was very, very simple. Since my dad was an alcoholic, he found another woman and he wanted a divorce. And so he asked my mom for a divorce. And we moved to a whole different town, state from where all that was happening. And we moved to the town that my grandmother lived in, who had no idea, the one that the pedophile got her pregnant when she was 13. So my mother's mother. And my grandmother had no idea what was happening to me whenever I was little. So whenever we moved to that town, there was something about the geographic location that made it stop. Now, a couple things. There was a pedophile next door in his 80s. So my mom would make me go there every day. And the houses would be just a few yards apart. So she would sit in the kitchen drinking coffee, smoking a cigarette, knowing exactly what was going on. And so that continued. But for lack of a better word, it was manageable because there was only one, and he was elderly and had partial dementia. And so, and then that stopped fully the day that so I had been trained to fear jail. I didn't know what it was. I had no idea what it was. No idea. To this day, I think I'm past that word being a trigger, but it took a lot of work. But because I was always hearing how they were terrified of jail, right? Because they knew if they were ever caught, they would be in jail. But I knew jail was something awful, something terrible to be feared. And I knew if anyone ever knew what we were all doing, there'd be jail. It'd be awful. So this neighbor pedophile would do pedophile behaviors one day on his porch because he had partial dementia. And that scared me to death because I thought we're going to jail. People are going to see this, we're going to jail. And again, I didn't know what it was. So I thought I've got to tell my mom. And I didn't want to tell her because whenever I was two, he was two, they did something especially horrific to me. And I thought if I told my mom, she wouldn't make me go back. And so I told my mom, but instead she got really angry at me and marched me back over there. And she goes, she's speaking and she just told me, and you got to do something about this. And so the torture that ensued after that was so unspeakable that I never, ever, ever spoke again. So at this time, when I thought I needed to tell I had no one else to tell besides my mom, I didn't know if she'd make me go back or not because she made me go back before, but I was more afraid of whatever, jail was than I was of talking to mom and being severely tortured for speaking. But this time, of course, as an adult looking back, mom never made me go back because she knew she would go to jail, prison. And she knew that if I was speaking, she didn't have all that protection of all that other stuff going on. So she didn't make me go back. That's when it stopped fully. Now, I've always known that, like in elementary school, I was watched. I was watched by the government, um, and still am to this day. So I've always known that, but I was never drugged back into like the trafficking house because we were too far away, or the university because we were further away. So I guess it was a geographic thing. And there was something about that and the fact that my grandmother was around a lot and had no part of it, that there was some kind of protection there for me. I'll never understand. But that's whenever it stopped fully. So there was no big rescue, no. And that was also whenever God erased 95% of my memory so I could quasi function and grow up until I got to the place where I was safe enough to start remembering.
Now, you mentioned having a high IQ. When you ended up going to school, was that something that you were recognized for? Were you also sort of acknowledged or put in any special classes in school for having been gifted as a child?
Yeah, so the first thing where it came out was I had my first business when I was 4 years old. And the I know, and the reason why was I thought I was an adult. I had had an extensive amount of adult experiences, and I was treated as an adult with those experiences. I hate to use the word sex because to a child, they don't have any concept of that word. That's an adult connotation developed by the pedophiles to give when the topic comes up, for example, and people say child sex trafficking, that gives adults a connotation that dummies down the problem. It glosses over the problem, whereas it's physical and mental torture from a child's standpoint. And the so whenever because of all that, I thought I was an adult. I was treated as an adult in that manner. And I knew my mom could not take care of me. So I no longer had the trafficking house. Though those were the people that took care of me, not my mom. By the time I was 4, I had Stockholm syndrome. So now I was on my own, and I knew my mom could not take care of me. I mean, that was proven. And I knew I had to be able to have things. And my number one thing I wanted was candy. I was 4. So I started a business. And what the business was, I figured out if you clipped coupons, they were like money. And so I would clip coupons, and some local neighborhood grocer who owned it was kind enough. I mean, so he would give me candy for my coupons. And it was just the goodness of his heart. He didn't have to do that. So that was my first business. By the time I think I was either 7 year olds or 8 year old, I had my first nonprofit event. And so I had like a carnival. I raised money for MS. And then I would do theater. So I would hold plays in the neighborhood and charge admission. I would write and produce the plays and act in the plays and hold admission and have, events at every holiday. So, and I would do artwork and sell it. So I was doing all of that in elementary school. And then I remember walking down the hallways. No, I was playing Barbies. I was playing Barbies one day, and God came up to me and he goes, "I want you to get your master's degree." I didn't know what that was. But I said, okay, because I always love to do whatever God tells me. And so I do have my master's now, but going through school, when I was in sixth grade, I started school-wide events, clubs, programs. I was in the band. I was always first chair. I was always in leadership roles. I was always on student council. I was always creating plays and winning awards, and everything was the top, the best, number one, all of it. So same way through college, I graduated with the highest honors, the best grades. When I got my master's, it was a 2 year program. It was so hard. Nobody in my class graduated except me. So, I started my first business the next year. I started, you call me a serial business owner. I love that. I'll have to borrow that. So yes, I thought all that was normal, but I have come to find out that that's not what most people do. Most people don't do stuff like that.
Right. Wow. Oh my goodness. That is so much, especially knowing what you had went through so young.
I
And that
know.
instead of, maybe processing that trauma, and I know that they dissociate you from it, so it's not something you're conscious of, but you hear time and time again sort of the opposite, that a lot of times it debilitates these different survivors who go through school and they don't know why, but they're having they're acting out, maybe they're overachieving, but they have PTSD and they're going through all these emotional things, and you're over here overachieving and starting businesses at age 4, and oh my gosh, what a life that you've had with the creativity that you were able to put into action.
Well, I will say this though. I was an alcoholic. So by the time I was 16 years old, or was I 15? I think it was 15. I discovered alcohol. And the first time I drank, I was blackout, dead drunk blackout. And that's how I lived. So I every Friday and Saturday night in high school, I was dead drunk, blackout drunk every Friday and Saturday night, still made straight A's. When I was in college, I did that 6 out of 7 nights out of the week. And the reason I didn't do it 7 nights was I couldn't get to the bars. So I was not okay, but I was a highly functioning alcoholic. And thank God I hated drugs. I mean, I tried that too, or I would have been a drug addict. And thank God I didn't own a car. I would have killed somebody and been in prison for that. So I couldn't afford a car. And I just, I look back and the different ways but that was, so I was not okay. I was not okay. I was highly functioning. And then, when I was at a job, there was so when I was 25 years old, I was led to the Lord Jesus Christ and I was saved. And when I was baptized and came up from the water, I never wanted to drink again, just like bam, you know. So praise God. So that part stopped. But I still had trauma. So I married a man who was not a nice person by any stretch of the imagination. So all of the abuse continued. And my therapist explained things to me. She said that it was one person and he wasn't as bad as what I had, because she said that normal people would never have married him, but I was not normal. So I carried that into, that relationship, and I didn't know how to get out because I'd never been taught how to say no. And so once the Lord got me away from that and I got to safety, then I could find my healing. But at the same time that all of these amazing things were going on in my professional life, my personal life, it was like being two different people. With this big facade that I had this wonderful marriage and all this kind of thing, whenever it was far from it. But I just was highly functioning.
It's incredible what we're able to overcome despite carrying so much inside of us. And you're an amazing example of that, the power of the human spirit and of overcoming things that are really meant to destroy us, and it's just amazing to see that you were able to function after all of that and that you eventually were able to overcome all the obstacles in your path. And I wanted to ask you, speaking of obstacles, speaking of self-sabotage, self-harm, at the time of disclosure for many survivors, that could trigger self-harm programming or even just that disparity of, oh my gosh, this is so horrible. How am I supposed to carry on? And it can be a really pivotal moment in somebody's journey on what they decide to do with that, and or what happens with the tools that they have available to navigate something like programming, which can be really scary if all of a sudden that's triggered and you want to hurt yourself in some way or a self-elimination type program. How did you overcome that whenever it happened to you? And what tools or maybe advice could you give to other survivors who might just be waking up or suspect that they might have gone through something to help them navigate that hardship and that journey?
So the the self-harm, whenever I started speaking, I didn't have that because I was ready to speak. So because I had God with me the whole time, knowing one day I would speak, and he said I was ready, and because I had this wonderful, godly trauma therapist, she said I was ready. So I didn't speak too soon to where that was activated. And I believe that by that time I had so much, because I work very, very hard at this. I mean, as an overachiever, I'm going to overachieve on the healing thing too. So I work super hard at my healing. And so whatever programming would have come out that had done that, I had long since um, worked through I call EMDR rewiring your brain. So the way we come out of this is, before we get help, it's like if I flip my kitchen light on, the bathroom light comes on. It's like somebody wired your house all screwed up. And when you try to flip this switch, this other thing happens. And you don't even know why, because you can't see behind the walls to see, oh, well, that wire, because that's what they do to us. And that's how our brain does too, to try to work around all the trauma. And so much of that had been rewired properly to where I didn't hurt myself. Now, I will say that I do have the different, I use the word parts for the different parts. And there is a part of me that is very harmful. I mean, very harmful. And I have this all the time. So I could be going about my day and think something that this harmful part doesn't like, and I'll get some horrific, awful pain somewhere, something debilitating, something, or make me get kind of poor at communication in my relationships. Um, or I remember one time I was in a meeting with one of my big clients, and it was a newer client, and I saw these pock marks all over his face, and I just thought it was his face. Like some people had the chicken pox and they had all those pock marks. Well, the next time I saw him, I was telling my therapist about him, and because he triggered me super bad. And I looked at his photo online, and he didn't have those. And I thought, well, it's a photo touch up. Well, when I saw him the next time, he actually didn't have those. So that part of me will try to sabotage relationships, my physical health. Oftentimes doesn't like me running, doesn't like me lifting. So it could be anything. It could be absolutely anything. And yet, and I have to remember though that that part of me is 3 years old. So so I work. So that sabotage thing can happen to me at any time, still today, because it's a part of me, and I treasure all parts of me. And but I have to learn to manage that. So, so when something out of the blue that makes no sense happens to me, which normally is several times a day, first I first I look to see if it's demonic because that's what it is a lot of the times. And so I'll bind demons and tell them to get out, go to the feet of Jesus for dispensation. I'll plead the blood of Jesus over them, get rid of them. And if it leaves, then I'll know it was demonic because they can do this stuff too. I just have to figure out what it is. If that doesn't work, I'll see if it's something real. Like maybe I really did stub my toe and it hurts because I stubbed my toe against the wall. And, so they have to figure out, is it real and does it need medical treatment of some sort or not? And if none of that's the case, then I know that it's the self-sabotage. So then I have to work through that trauma and process it out. And for me, it's like speaking to the little girl in me to let her know she's safe now. It's okay. You're okay. If I'm going to go out to run, that part of me can stay home, if she wants to, or ride on Jesus' horse, or it's like having a little girl with me all the time, and I have to be tender and caring and loving because it's like acting out. If you have an actual physical girl with you who just came out of this, because I help many mothers with these children. I just got off of a Zoom this morning with several mothers in Europe who are on my LifeWave team. I'm using that, God's using that as a magnet to draw people to me for healing. And part of the healing is community and helping the little ones too and get them on these LifeWave. And so I got to, so it's like seeing these little ones on Zoom. Sometimes they pop on the camera. It was such a sweet blessing. And so it's like having a physical little one with me that just survived a heinous, because I hear these mothers talk about the same thing that these real physical children do to them. The mothers themselves try to harm them, try to harm themselves. It's no different, but it's a part of me that survived that I will always have. And have just had to come to love and nurture and care for that little girl part of me so that, we're safe, it's okay, we're here, we're not there, everything's okay. I have a bunch of popsicles in the refrigerator. Not that I eat many because I'm an athlete and I have to really watch what I eat, but they're fruit popsicles, so I make it part of my meal plan. Uh, so things that would nurture and comfort a 3-year-old, how I talk to her, I'll actually talk to that part of myself, and it's soothing, calming, um, making it real. And there's nothing at all unusual about this either, because it's what we have to do. Each person listening, even if they haven't had trauma, you actually have a child part. People will talk about their child, the child in them. So when you ride a roller coaster and throw up your hands and scream and you're 70 years old, that is the child in you. That is not the 70-year-old adult in you. So we all have this. It's just I consider this, Emma, another gift. So I have this knowledge that inside of me, there's always going to be a child part that I am to love and nurture and care for that gets scared sometimes, but I can love and nurture and care for her. Whereas adults without trauma, they'll have their child part of them act out and they don't even know it. They'll be mean to someone else or do harmful things or hurt themselves and they think it's the adult part of them, not even knowing they have a child part. So I consider this another gift.
Absolutely. And I love your advice and what you were just saying about comforting. Do you have any other advice for survivors that have systems and parts who maybe are experiencing some inner turmoil, chaos, and disagreements and
Yes.
things that sort of, make their life destabilizing on how you were able to create some peace and stability inside?
Yes. So one of my favorite things, so I have a website that the letter Q and the word grit, grit.org, and I list, everything that helped me there. But one thing that comes to mind are children's books. So you cannot have enough children's books. And the reason why is you're talking to a child because that's who was harmed and that's who's causing the harm today. And so they need to be talked to like a child. And so I would get, I remember there was a time, for example, when I'd be out running and I had a terrible time crossing the street, just out of the blue. Now I'm an adult. I know how to cross the street, right? It's just, I'm an adult. But I mean, I had a terrible time crossing the street. I'd be overcome with this fear, and it was so irrational. And I checked, it wasn't demonic. I knew it wasn't real because I'm an adult, and but it was there nonetheless. And so I bought books on how to cross the street and safely. So then I would read them out loud and just think about the little girl in me, and start reading books about how we safely cross the street. Just like you would if you have a little one in your home, your little child or your grandchild or your niece or your nephew, same thing, you're teaching them. So books. So anything that's causing you trauma or fear or upset, find a child's book on it and read to yourself. The other thing that's helpful is children's toys. So I'll have color books, and they're not the adult color books. They're like children's color books. And sometimes I'll get the big fat crayons and I'll just start coloring to self-soothe. Or this is a great way to process out trauma as an adult. If you handwrite, it activates the analytical side of the brain. It takes out the emotion. You can write your trauma out and get it out. It's like passing a wound. For your child, get a inside you, get a drawing pad and some colors and let them just free color the memories. So that, and they're going to look like, when I do this, that stick figures and everything else, but that's not the point. The point is you're letting the child in you process that out and draw that out. And then scents, we have to be careful. Smells, we have to be careful with that because that's the most triggering of all. But I like Play-Doh. So whenever, if the little girl in me needs self-soothing, I'll grab my Play-Doh. And sometimes when I'm shopping, like at Walmart, I'll go in the toy section and see if that part of me sees something that she would like. And then, I might color Easter eggs. Again, I think it's a gift because I think that adults that don't go through this, everybody has child parts. And even in adults without trauma, they'll come out at times if you snap at your loved one, or they'll come out because that's not who you are. And you'll wonder, why did I do that? Well, it's because the little child in you got triggered somehow. It can happen to anyone. So I am very much more aware of it because of my background. So I like toys too, toys, conversations, timeout. So, if you've got a 3-year-old who's misbehaving, I've watched other children. I watched my nieces one time, and she has twins, and the boys were, I think, 2, maybe 3, and one of them had a terrible time with a temper, just terrible time. And he would just go into these little 2-year-old fits. And I watched her, and she would put him in the corner, and he hated it, but he'd do it. So I practiced that. That was helpful. And then she started teaching her 2-year-old to self-soothe. And she's like, now go in your mind and just calm down. Just calm your body down and think about that. And then I would watch him be 3 and 4 years old, and his temper thing would start. And she'd be like, do you need to self-soothe? Yes, mommy. And so he would just get quiet and go in himself and calm down. So I watch what real parents do because I'm so far removed from having, a 2 or 3-year-old. I'll watch what they do that's successful, and then I'll do that for my own child part.
Thank you for sharing all of that. I know it's going to be really helpful for people on the other side of the screen and even for people who aren't
Good.
survivors, just to understand how to
Yes.
take care of themselves and that it's okay to let that child in all of us come out and to be able to soothe that and treat ourselves to a popsicle or a coloring book, and that it can actually be very, very healing. Even Kathy O'Brien talks about just writing, and the power of taking your thoughts and expressing them through your hands in some way, creatively. And I really appreciate all
Yes.
of that you just shared. And speaking of, I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about Q Grit, to talk about your work what you're doing for survivors, your podcast, because you really do offer a lot of resources for us and a lot of amazing services that you've put that entrepreneurial spin on and contributed to the movement. So I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about that because I think it could be really helpful for some people.
Oh, wonderful. So thank you. Um, a few years before God told me to start speaking, he started giving me ideas for the aftercare of the little ones once they're rescued from the tunnels and above ground. And I would just take notes and just take notes and write it down and keep it in folders. And at that time, I had no idea how it would be. I couldn't even imagine speaking, although I knew one day I would. And I would just, whatever he said, his ideas. And the day before, I spoke on Michael Jacob's show on that 4/24/24 date, the full hour show. I thought, oh gosh, he's going to ask me, where do people go to learn more? Well, I didn't have anything. And I thought, I can't. So my human resource consulting website is lynnhaggerman.com. And I thought, that doesn't make sense. So I took all those notes that God had given me over the years and I created qgrit.org the day before the show. And of course I've grown it since then. So you're seeing, it's probably changed about 25%, 30%. Anyway, so this is the information that God told me, and it's to help the aftercare for the children who've been harmed. It's also for the adults who've been harmed, have PTSD trauma because of what happened to them as a child. So to help them with their healing and journey toward recovery. And then it's also to help anyone with trauma of any kind, because trauma is trauma. So vets or police officers or people with long-term medical conditions or someone who's lost a loved one too soon, it's trauma is trauma is trauma. So what I have is what I do now to help people, and that's what you're looking at now. So now I'm trying to fund the aftercare. So I do coaching and training on all these things we talked about today. I share LifeWave because I mentioned earlier it decreased my PTSD and anxiety by 70%. And not only that, I used to wear glasses and now I don't. I used to have IBS and now I don't. It increased my athletic performance significantly. So there's even more there than for trauma. And then I still use my human resource consulting business. So this is how I fund. This is, I work very hard. And when people do these things, so I know, for example, everyone who reaches out to me through LifeWave, they're not only wanting to help themselves or a little one, but they're supporting and encouraging me. And that means the world to me. So this is where I'm at now, is speaking and using my gifts to earn income and get the funding because of the next stages that will be in giving my testimony anywhere I can, which I do. I'm on, I have a podcast, the Lynne Scott Haggerman Show on Rumble, and I just started YouTube about a month ago. I think I have 14 followers so far, and that's Lynne Scott Haggerman. And then my LifeWave website is liveyoungerwithlynn.com. I'm on Truth Social at Victory Always, and I'm on X at Haggerman91741. So yes, this is me being me, having 5 million things going at the same time. And then you'll also see on the qgrit.org what's coming up in the future. So that includes long-term housing underneath the more, there's future plans and phases. There you go. So I'm on phase 1, and then phase 2 is going to be wellness centers and transformation centers. So you can consider it like day, not like long-term housing. This would be like helping out during your day. So that's the initial. And then soon, hopefully, I'm going to have long-term facilities to house the children because so many children who will be rescued aren't going to have families. And we're going to need long-term housing. It takes many years to recover. So phase 2 and 3 are more for the adults than anything to help the adults with trauma of any kind. Um, and then the other phases are long-term care for the children. And so, for example, there's a college for sale in the town I live at. And my hope is for the funding to be able to buy the college, and then we can, that'd be the perfect facility for the children. And then we can just remodel it. And I love to use that as a prototype and then go throughout the nation and the world. Now, I will say that through LifeWave, God is using me like a magnet, and I am finding people throughout the nation and now internationally that God has given them plans too for the children and these long-term housing facilities. And I have someone who has an animal rehab center in California. I have someone, for example, in Texas that God gave her a plan 20 years ago. It includes retired people to help the children, to help raise them. I mean, we have beautiful people all over the world that God's given plans to. So it's not just going to be me doing this, it's going to be many people. But then that's the next phase is the long-term housing because it's going to take a long time for the children to heal. And then I also have under the Let's Find Missing Kids tab, in February of this year, Tom Homan deputized every U.S. citizen to find the missing children from the Biden administration. We have 900,000 that are missing. And so what this page is, it tells people right now it's simply, sorry, thunder. Gracie jumped, I'm sorry, made me jump too.
No
Um,
worries.
so it's to call ICE and when you see something, say something. So it's not like we're supposed to go Rambo anybody. It's if you think someone's being trafficked to call ICE and you can call or fill in an online form. It's very anonymous. So I also put on this page how to recognize if a child is being trafficked. So you know what you're looking at, how to recognize if a child is being harmed in any way. And then I also give tips on this page about what to do and what not to do in those cases, because I have found since I've been speaking, many people reaching out and just this, they see the signs in a child they love and they're like, what do I do? So first I recommend what not to do. I find overall our systems are extremely corrupt. And if you enter the system, you're not going to get a lot of help, if anything, possibly more harm done to the children. And I believe that we, the people, have got this, and arm in arm, we can help each other. And so I list what not to do and I list what to do. And of course, there's a contact page that people reach out to me at any time. So I try to put information there. And I do believe that we'll be doing this worldwide once we find all the children in the United States. So that's that mission. And then I also have under the More tab ideas for all the listeners to do because I get asked all the time, what can I do? And there's going to, yeah, the what can you do? So there's a whole list of what people can do, like the improve your physical and mental health. We're going to need people to help these children, and we need you guys healthy to be able to help them. And so that's number one. I mean, it's like in the airplane, put your oxygen mask on first. So we need you healthy, and then ask God what your part is. I have a whole list here. So we're going to need people to, for example, who have animal therapies. We're going to need people who are prayer warriors, deliverance ministries, gardening. We need healthy food for the children and nutritionists, and we need just so many things that people can do. So this is I'm a businesswoman, so this is a very action oriented. This is what you can do, and I believe if everyone asks God and just prays, what is your part? And then start taking one step toward it and then another step. And then he's bringing us together. I see him do that now, Emma. I see him, I feel like a magnet. I'm sure others do too that are survivors. I see him gathering people to different ministries, like my little YouTube. I have 14 followers now. And a week ago, I had someone reach out to me, a couple, and they're retired, I think in their 70s. And she was watching YouTube, some big popular show, and the next show up was mine. And she's like, well, 14 followers, blew it off. Happened 3 times. And then finally, she's like, okay, God. So she listened, and then she found a kindred spirit because God gave her a similar plan for something that she's calling Ponderosa. And that's an old, I don't know how old show with like a beautiful place in nature that help people. And so now she's on my LifeWave team, and this is what's happening. It's a gathering of people, and everyone's slowly learning their part and what they're going to do and how it's going to be done. And we're all going a step at a time, hand in hand, shoulder to shoulder, and we are going to get this thing done. I mean, we are. And I am their voice. So you're going to hear more and more of these people on podcasts. I'm like you, Emma, but a bit different. It's like we need to get stories out and what's happening out. I want to give people hope that there are people who care. And I mean, a lot of people care. They just don't know what to do.
Yeah.
So people taking action, and this is just very, very action oriented.
Thank you so much for explaining all this. Your website is just a wealth of information and resources, and I love that you packed so much into it. And also, this is likely probably the best place for people to contact you. I've seen that a little contact icon come up multiple times on this site. So for people who are interested in supporting your mission, if they are interested in working with you with coaching and or from a business perspective and or LifeWave, you guys can get a hold of Lynn directly here on her website. And if you're an advocate, if you're a therapist, looking to learn more, this is a great resource for you guys to just go browse through. There's tons of tabs, tons of information. And obviously you guys can donate here to her mission as well, help her achieve the rest of stage 1 and then the stage 2. Let's get Lynn on her way to making her dreams come true for this. None of
Yeah.
this is cheap what we do, and obviously we're not going to get support from government and different agencies. So we have to help support each other on this mission. And then obviously you guys can connect with her and contact her on here too. And she has podcasts that she's done, Keys to Transformation, lots of great resources on this website that you guys can tap into, as well as her podcast on Rumble and YouTube now. Congratulations on doing this, podcasting and speaking out. It's a huge step, and it's amazing what you've done in such a short time with all these guests and videos that you have. So if you guys also want to follow her podcast, I'm going to have that listed. If you're on Rumble or YouTube, it's the Lynne Scott Haggerman Show. So you guys can just type that in and find it. But if you're having trouble with that, I'll have it linked in the show notes so you guys can go connect with her there and support her. Please go watch her videos. It's incredible when we get free resources. I know a lot of us don't have a ton of money that we can necessarily spend on tons of books and things like that. And it's always really amazing whenever creators give us ways that we can learn for free. And Lynn's done that with hours and hours and hours of content that you guys can go subscribe to and share. That's a great way that you guys can pay her back, is just share her podcast, go share it with a friend, share it on your social media, watch it, comment on it, help support her, give her more followers. Let anybody that has their eye on her know that we have our eyes on her too, and we're going to protect her and support her and stand by her. And so Lynn, thank you for creating all of this for us and for all the work that you're doing for this community, for the coaching that you're doing to help people heal, for all the free content that you're making, in addition to all of the ways that you're helping resource yourself so you can continue doing this work. And it's just incredible. It's amazing seeing what you've been able to do in such a short time. And I know it's going to give tons of people hope who feel hopeless or who don't know what to do. You're giving us all the solutions on how to overcome all of that. So thank you from the bottom of my heart.
You are very welcome. And thank you from I mean, you are such a great, I love your words, Emma. You're just so gracious. You're just a profound speaker with your words. It blesses me to the bottom of my soul. And thank you so much for having me on. I mean, it has just been, I love deep diving into things. I love your long form interviews. Most podcasts are shorter, which is fine, but I love that your show is more of the deep dive. So we can have a lengthy conversation and I feel like I was able to just share so much. And thank you. I'll be able to share this on my channel because you're right. Before we started, my tribe loves to hear more about my story. So they'll hear several things that they've not heard before, too.
And it's an honor to have you on. I have a feeling this is just the first of many times that you're going to be on. I know there's so much that we could have, taken more deep dives into, and I look forward to doing that in the future. But thank
Me
you
too.
for everything that you did share today. I know it's going to give a lot of people validation, hope, puzzle pieces to their own puzzle, and education, empowerment. And just really honored to have you on and grateful for all your support of this podcast, of survivors, for all the work that you're doing. And can't wait to have you back on. Is there anything else that you wanted to share or leave people with before we wrap up?
I want to give people hope. I want to give people hope. If if I can do this, and I did, you can too. So it is work. And as you said, Emma, I've outlined on my website everything that I've done in short form that has gotten me to the person that you see today, not just a survivor, but beyond thriver. And if I can do it, you can do it too. So I want to give people hope that there is light at the end of the tunnel, and you can do this. And we're here to help. None of us are alone. And my little tribe's gathering, just like Emma's little tribe's gathering, and now I'm part of Emma's little tribe. And so this is just, shoulder to shoulder, hand in hand, we are going to do this thing. We're going to stop it, and we're going to help people, and we're going to heal people, and we are going to get to the other side, and we're going to do it together. And it's going to happen.
Amen. Enough is enough. Now is the time. And we're so grateful for everything that you're contributing to it. I know it's going to span the test of time and make waves and change so many lives. And I can't wait to see what else God uses you for because you've done so much and you're just beginning. And so for
Amen.
everybody listening, I'm going to have all of Lynn's information in the show notes. Support her, follow her, donate to her, connect with her if you're looking for coaching, share her information with other survivors, advocates, therapists, help connect her, resource her. And then on your end, soak up everything that she's giving you too, because there's so much for us to learn from her as well that she's providing. So I'm going to have all her information in the show notes. You guys can connect with her from her website, which I'll have below as well. I'll have her social media, her podcast. So just in every way that you can, go lift up survivors. It's a really free and easy way that you guys can contribute for all of those, the people out there that always say, what can I do? What can I do? It's a really easy thing to just go follow, support, and share their content that they're making, support their business. So I'm going to have all that in the show notes. I'll have all my links as well. You guys connect with me wherever you can. We couldn't do this without you, and we're so grateful for all your support. Thank you guys for listening today. God bless you all, and we will see you next time.